All across the country, there is this debate raging about the effect of Hurricane Helene and Milton, and will people get the resources they need to rebuild? There's tons of misinformation flowing around. Donald Trump and others are trying to claim that the Democrats aren't helping, won't help. And at the same time, the one guy that could be truly instrumental in making sure that people get the money they need, House Speaker Mike Johnson, still pretty disinterested about the whole thing. Now he's facing renewed pressure. More than 60 House Democrats have signed on to a letter urging Johnson to call the House back into session. Right now, it's on a month-long recess that has just begun. We are weeks away from them even coming back, let alone debating extra funds for FEMA, let alone passing it and then distributing it. And I don't think that if your house was just destroyed, that you want to wait a month. I think that you'd like us to be a little bit snappier when it comes to the response. He's not worried about it. He was asked about this yesterday, and he said basically what he said previously. It will take some time for states to calculate the extent of their financial need. He really, look, if you've been watching TDR this week, we've talked about this before. He thinks that's a really convincing answer to the question of why don't you guys get on this? Like, why don't you get us the aid that we need? Well, calculations, there's a lot of numbers, and like, how exactly do you add them? Like, some people say that you carry the one, but I think now school kids get taught a different way of doing addition. It's really complicated. And he doesn't think that they need to go back into session. He says, we'll get around to it at some point, maybe in a month, we'll start talking about it. And anyway, in the meantime, we did our supplemental appropriations bill. So the federal government has everything they need. Maybe not, by the way. He's being not only flippant about the timing, he's being flippant about the funding as well. So lawmakers did pass a $20 billion package for FEMA's disaster relief funding prior to heading on their resource. Bear in mind, though, FEMA had requested $33.1 billion. And again, as I always say, I'm not a mathematician or anything, but I feel like 20% is not that significant a percentage of $33 billion. They thought that money would need to go somewhere. They don't have it. And now we're getting hit with 2 devastating hurricanes inside of just a couple of weeks. I don't know, I feel like something maybe doesn't add up, and maybe it's the funding numbers. But anyway, the Democrats who signed on to this letter say that no, the past funding is not necessarily sufficient. And we have a bunch of them. They say the stopgap funds, quote, will not suffice. These provisions fall critically short of what will be necessary to address the scale of destruction and the recovery needs. And they say as well, not only do we need to make sure that there's additional funding, but also they say that Congress must pass proactive measures to address intensifying storm seasons, which, quote, requires substantial funding that ensures FEMA can maintain a state of readiness. And there's a couple things I want to say about that. So first of all, can we stop and acknowledge the irony that the Democrats are begging and pleading for the Republicans to give funding to mostly red states and mostly Republicans whose houses have been lost, whose businesses have been destroyed, are maybe looking for family members still in the rubble. And the Democrats are like, can we maybe do something about this for your people, your voters? And the Republicans are like, it's way easier to just spread conspiracy theories on Twitter. Like, I could do that for free. I don't need to fly back to DC. And so they're not that convinced. But that last graphic we showed you, that honestly might be the critical part. Because look, I don't doubt that at some point the Republicans are going to accept extra funding. I mean, it's going to go to their states. Ron DeSantis, can choose what to do with it. That's going to be pretty appealing to them. But think about what the Democrats are saying, not just get the money for Helene or for Milton, but because the storms are intensifying, let's do something like looking forward, something that will make us ready, for additional years. Do you think that Mike Johnson wants anything to do with that? Particularly in the immediate aftermath of the 2 storms, when the eyes of the nation might understandably be on Congress to see what they're going to do, how serious they're going to take this. We are digging people out of the rubble now. Is that when he wants to talk about the possible effect of climate change on hurricanes? Does he want to talk in that moment about maybe ongoing additional funding for FEMA? I don't think he wants to do any of that. I think that he's hoping that if he waits a month, maybe people will just move on. Maybe they won't care so much. Maybe the Republicans won't have to do anything that could necessitate either a climate emergency declaration or additional taxes to fund this. And in the meantime, I like that the Democrats, including the Harris campaign, are calling those Republicans out who are not being responsible. Bear in mind, I told you 60 Democrats signed on to that bill. I haven't yet told you how many Republicans have signed on to that bill. And the number is, well, you already know what the number is. It's 0. And the interesting thing about that is there are multiple Republicans who've said we should return to deal with this. But they don't want to put their name down on a letter, certainly not with Democrats. Even though they'd look responsible, even though they'd look like they have compassion and empathy for those suffering in the wake of these hurricanes. I don't want to put my name in a letter though. Like, sure, I want people to get money because their house is destroyed, but like not to the extent of signing on to something. I don't want to do that. And what you just saw, what we flashed for a second, is the Harris campaign tweeting out all of the Republicans who voted against the additional FEMA funding. And now, basically all of them, by the way, I know that the text is too small. Marjorie Greene is there, and Lauren Boebert is there, Matt Gaetz is there, and Anna Paulina Luna. Like, you already know the names that are going to be there. They're frantically going all across the country and all across social media like, oh, FEMA's gonna steal your house and there's not enough money and it's Harris's fault. Harris simultaneously has no role in this. Back off, Harris. Also, it's totally her fault and they should have more resources, but also I voted against those resources. MAGA, everyone, let's MAGA. And so I'm glad that they're, blowing up the spot of those who just a couple of weeks ago had the opportunity to do the responsible thing and chose not to. And now they want to look like they're the responsible ones.